All right, everyone. I am here with Tom Feegel. Tom is the co-founder and CEO of Beond. Beond is a startup focused on treating addiction, especially opioid addiction, using psychedelic medicine, and in particular, using a psychedelic called Ibogaine. Tom, thanks so much for taking the time to hang out and talk with me today. Really
Thank
appreciate
you,
it.
Bram. Thank you. It's good to see you.
It's good to
Nice to
see you
be
too.
here.
Yeah. So I think you have a pretty interesting company that's a little bit differentiated from the stuff that I've had on the show before. There are some companies that are working on treating addiction, but they're more on like the drug development side. You guys are actually interacting with patients directly. You're like all the way, you're sort of solving the last mile, actually, getting the treatment to the patients and delivering it to them in the best way possible. Maybe it would be good to start off with just an overview of like how serious the opioid addiction problem is and how Ibogaine is potentially way better than the existing treatments that are out there. Because I don't know that everyone is
Well,
necessarily aware.
sure. So the opioid epidemic, we call it, the uh, fatal overdose epidemic has skyrocketed, especially during the last few years with COVID-19. We saw a 45% increase, topping out at 100,000 deaths in the US for the first time in history. So if you think about that for a second, that's 273 people a day, every single day of the week, yesterday, today, tomorrow, with no abatement in sight. And that's never happened before. Now, if you think about the compounding effects of the suffering, so for every overdose, there's several people that don't quite overdose, and then there's several other people who come close to overdosing and affect the lives of many other people. So we're focused on trying to create a solution that will reduce that materially. And we've seen statistically the conventional solutions in rehabilitation, drug and alcohol centers in the US have a very low single digit success rate. So Ibogaine in particular has demonstrated that it interrupts the withdrawal symptoms of opiates in particular, and alcohol and other substances. This is a key factor because it's the withdrawal symptoms that prevent most candidates for treatment from beginning or carrying out the steps recommended.
Gotcha. Yeah. And Ibogaine, I mean, how did you even get into this? Ibogaine is not something that's certainly, that's known to the, like, the public at large, I guess. What was sort of your backstory and how you sort of ended up, being a guy that is running a company dedicated to using Ibogaine to treat addiction?
Well, like many of these stories, it's a personal one. For me, someone in my family was affected directly by opiate addiction. And it started in a way that's quite similar to the scenarios of many other people in the US. They were prescribed Vicodin, an opiate painkiller, for a very routine dental procedure, but this substance affected them in a dramatic way. They wanted more Vicodin. They were prescribed more Vicodin. And over the course of about a year and a half, they couldn't get the Vicodin. And so, like many other people, they went to a substance that would satisfy the withdrawal symptoms, but wasn't prescription. This was IV heroin. And so what happened was this person, we were able to get them to go to several different high-end drug and alcohol rehabilitation centers in the US. They did what they were told. They went for more than 30 days, sometimes 90 days. And they would get clean, but they would have the withdrawal symptoms sometime afterwards. It wasn't until a friend recommended Ibogaine at a facility in Mexico that they knew about the substance, they tried it, and miraculously had no withdrawals in 12 hours after a very intense psychospiritual experience. So we've been aware of this for 13 years because they've been off all drugs and alcohol since that time. What caused the creation of Beond was the fact that the environment in which this procedure was conducted was, let's say, very rudimentary. It was an underground provider, of which there are many, because Ibogaine still is a Schedule I substance in the U.S. So because it's illegal, people go outside of the country to try it or to use it, and so they went to a facility in Mexico. The environment had no medical support, no advanced cardio life support systems, no training. In fact, the rumor has it people were using opiates in the facility, just about the worst you could possibly get. And so when in 2021, I was transitioning from one executive position to my next, I decided there should be a facility in the world where somebody could go that we would recommend, that we would feel they had adequate medical care, scientific integrity, the right sort of nursing, the right sort of psychology, and most importantly, the right sort of aftercare. Because if you think about this care continuum, this experience of a patient, it's after the withdrawals are interrupted that the real work has to begin. And so we decided that in order to do this right, you don't just have to qualify the person, you don't just have to provide the procedure, you really have to envelop them in the therapies that are necessary to support them through the transition after Ibogaine.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's a lot that I could touch on there. I think it's important for people to recognize that on the one hand, you hear a lot of stories that are very similar to what you just talked about. Like someone has struggled to get off opioids for a long time, then they have a single Ibogaine experience, and then the withdrawals are broken. But what that story doesn't necessarily like show is the intensity of the Ibogaine experience, which I have never personally experienced myself. But it's a very intense experience, and it's not without its risks, which is why it's important to have like the proper medical care and properly trained professionals on site. And
it really does.
Yeah,
It really
right.
does need to be a holistic approach. It really does have to encompass the physical, the psychological, the relational, and as you touch on, the spiritual aspects of the experience itself. Ibogaine is known to be, as you put it, a very intense psycho-spiritual experience. So the trip is super intense. However, it's also an accelerated experience that would otherwise have to occur to really get to the underlying trauma that is causing the maladaptive coping that the drug addiction represents. Something we believe that most addicts, if not all addicts, have some sort of trauma in their life that's untreated, that they are reducing the suffering of through the behavior of addiction, whether it's alcohol or other substances, opiates or other substances. So what Ibogaine's trying to do is safely accelerate the discovery of what that trauma is. And so the therapy can begin. Now, it also has the physiological effect of eliminating the post-acute withdrawal symptoms. This is the 90-day period during which most addicts for opiates and other substances go back. It's when they're getting back to life. They can get clean, but it's when life stressors come back into their life, family, job, money, relationship, etc. That's when there's something that causes them to go back. And so Ibogaine has a unique characteristic of eliminating that experience so that the therapeutic work can really begin, can have effects and take root much faster than other scenarios. So, this happens in 12 to 24 hours, as opposed to 30, 60, or 90 days in a conventional treatment facility.
Right. And what I think is cool about Beond, disclosure, my investment fund, Empath Ventures, did invest in Beond's first fundraising round. One of the things that I liked about what you guys were doing was that, I had been aware of the Ibogaine, addiction treatment world for a while. But if you just Google Ibogaine treatment, you find all these websites that, first of all, look like they're, built in the 90s. Second of all, you read reviews and there's like a lot of very sketchy stuff that you hear about, sort of like what you talked about with the person in your family, right? Going to this place that was, not exactly above board with everything. And it just seems like it's like, on the one hand, you have this very powerful and effective treatment. But on the other hand, because of the nature of the beast, the fact that it's illegal in the US, that you basically have to go to Mexico, and probably because of the fact that you're dealing with people that are desperate for solutions, right? And they're desperate, plus they're vulnerable not just because of the addiction they're going through, but also vulnerable because they're going into a very intense psychedelic experience. It just seems like the space attracts a lot of, shady operators. And what I liked when I saw the Beond deck is I was like, wow, this looks like some people that are basically trying to create, a fully above board, like legit, for lack of a better word, Ibogaine treatment program and facility. So yeah, I mean, maybe you could touch a little bit more on like how you are, set apart from some of these other companies like Clear Sky.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. I mean, it really touches on the entire care continuum. What we're trying to do at a most simple level is to create an environment where we would want to send, God forbid, a loved one or a family member or a friend. So we thought about, what do you have to do in the very beginning to qualify someone for an Ibogaine treatment? So we're not trying to sell you an Ibogaine treatment. We're trying to prepare you if you're qualified for an Ibogaine procedure that happens in Mexico. So you touch on something very important, which is the vulnerability, right? People are desperate. Family members are desperate to try to find a place that will really help the person who needs it. And so the first thing we do is education. Really deep education. This is not about reading a website. This is about meeting someone who can explain what is both going to happen, what are the risks, and how do we mitigate them through the right sorts of assessments, laboratory testing, et cetera, to make sure that the person we're talking about is a qualified candidate. One of the metrics we use is, how many people do we say no to? It's a very sad experience, but the need to prepare someone for this procedure is so important that we actually know that we're going to be saying no to certain people. But if you think about it, outside of the context of psychedelic assisted therapy for addiction, this happens all the time. If you're going to go get an appendectomy, the doctor's going to make sure that you're going to be okay during the procedure. It doesn't matter what the medical procedure is. Part of the care continuum is to make sure you're qualified.
Right. And part of the challenge with sort of these psychedelic business models is that on the one hand, they're supposed to be like healing modalities, but obviously there's a financial incentive to just give as many psychedelics to as many people as you can, right? And that's kind of the challenge. So yeah, being able to say no is important. Could you maybe give an example of like what would disqualify someone from a treatment?
Sure, a previous cardiac incident, heart attack, something that shows up in their EKG that indicates to our medically licensed, board certified emergency medicine and addiction medicine doctors who have MDs after their name, that this person could have a higher level of risk than they know how or they want to treat or embrace. So look, our doctors are trained in emergency medicine and addiction medicine. They've done thousands of successful Ibogaine treatments over decades, right? They've never had what we call an adverse consequence, which is someone who exhibits some physiological response to Ibogaine that that means an intervention is necessary, whether it is some sort of cardiac care or maybe something not as significant. The way you avoid that is you don't let people who are not qualified in the first place. And so if you think about the history of Ibogaine underground treatment facilities, normally what happened was an addict found Ibogaine. They had a miraculous experience. They decided they could help people with all best intentions. So they decided that they wanted to become a provider of Ibogaine. What they forgot or what they ignored was the need for risk mitigation. And so there's some very good, very well-intended underground providers out there, but they don't have the equipment. So the other thing we do differently than other facilities is we invested in the state-of-the-art equipment that is in the room with you to make sure that you're being monitored properly, and that if there is any indication of some hint of an adverse event, intervention could occur. This, for our doctors, has never happened, but they're prepared, right? It's kind of like flying a plane. Most pilots have never been involved in a crash, but they know what to do if something seems to suggest they might need to avoid a storm or prepare for some turbulence. So what we do differently is, number one, we educate people. Number two, we qualify them extremely meticulously. Number three, we prepare the environment with the best possible people, with the most experience. We have two, Dr. Jeffrey Camlett, our Chief Medical Officer, and Dr. Felipe Malacara, our Chief Clinical Officer. Both of them are the most experienced MDs in the provision of Ibogaine. They've both done thousands of treatments with no adverse events. Dr. Felipe Malacara was the number 2 doctor at Clear Sky for 17 years. And he left there, I think, because he really wanted to do things differently. He really wanted to be part of a team, part of an environment that was designed to treat the entire client or patient experience. So the last piece that we're really focused on and is different is the aftercare. What in the psychedelic world they call integration, what we call aftercare. So it is robust, it is telemedicine, it is psychological therapy for the treatment of addiction.
Gotcha. And that aftercare, does that take place at the same place that the Ibogaine treatment happens, or is that aftercare process something that happens over the period, over the course of months, maybe via telehealth? Like, how does that really work?
Well, it's very interesting because when we were, look, again, there's never been anything in the Ibogaine world like what we're doing. The environment is purpose designed. It's the kind of place that you'd want to spend a week. It's the kind of place that you'd want to spend a weekend. Pool, nutrition, what we call healthy experiences, yoga, art therapy, music therapy, movement, everything from Tai Chi to dance. This is not required, but it's certainly offered because we want people to never get bored and always be preparing to develop themselves. So when we thought about how best to design this experience, we thought, number one, you've got to really engage with the client up front. And so everybody, like we are today, is familiar now with using Zoom or using telemedicine tools to connect through video. So our coaches and our therapists are based in the US. They're providing a service largely to people who are in the US, though we do have international clients. That happens remotely prior to your qualification and prior to your departure to Mexico for a procedure. The experience, obviously, the procedure happens outside of the United States through Beond, Mexico, where you're engaged with doctors, nurses, psychologists face to face. right? Just like you would expect to do at a hospital or a doctor's office or a treatment facility. What's different is the same coach that you met while you were preparing can connect with you via telemedicine in Mexico. So there's a continuity of care. And then when you're departing Mexico, it's that care provider, that coach, or that psychologist who's essentially virtually escorting you to your from the facility to your home. And then when you get home, the first person you talk to is the first person you talked to when you were being qualified. So that's all done via telemedicine. And the good news is we can scale that significantly because there's a lot of providers, a lot of therapists who are licensed and credentialed who are capable of providing this service with training to better understand our protocols. Those people are in the US. They're probably not even in the same time zone as their client in some cases, but we make a very concerted effort to make sure the profile of the coach and the profile of the client have some match. We're not taking a Navy SEAL and connecting them with an opiate addict, even if they wanted to be. We're trying to find people who have shared common experience and all of the coaches have done Ibogaine, for example. So they can tell you what it's like, what you're about to experience. They can help you prepare in mind, body, and spirit. And then they can help you after the procedure get back to work, integrate with your family, etc.
And in terms of scaling, I mean, I know right now all the procedures are done in Mexico, but I know you have, ambitions to make it bigger than just Mexico. Maybe this is a good place to talk about sort of how this works legally, right? Ibogaine, for those who don't know, it's not a synthetic drug. It's from, I think, the root of the iboga tree, which is native to a certain part of Africa. Its psychedelic properties have been known for a very, very long time, and it's been used in certain cultures around the world, and in is it that you can use it in any place where it's unscheduled? Is that right? And so you plan on opening clinics in places where it's unscheduled. What are some of those places where you might be able to expand?
Right. Well, let's back up. So, first of all, what we provide in the United States is telemedicine, is mental health treatment, is therapy, is totally legal, and frankly, extremely popular right now. The fact that our coaches are helping you prepare for a psychedelic experience, they're not recommending that. They're helping you prepare for that, helping you prepare to make that decision. If you make that decision, then you would travel to a location where the substance is unregulated or legal. In Mexico, it's unregulated. It's obviously utilized there because of its proximity to the United States. So it's easy to get to for most people, and it's easy to get home for most people. The substance itself, the plant itself, does come from the iboga root, a plant that is grown in Gabon in West Africa. So some people actually go all the way to West Africa because it's a substance that's used in a spiritual practice, and they want to go deeper into that sort of lineage, that heritage, that experience, and really understand what's next for them. How can they grow and become more familiar with the plant and the experience? But most people don't want to do that. They don't have to do that. They go to Mexico. We have 2 facilities in Mexico now. We'll be opening a 3rd very soon, and we believe that we really need a network of these premium facilities, all using the same protocols, all using the same shared data, the same back-end technology that you would expect in a Class A facility in the United States. CRM, electronic records management, all of the same sort of technology so that it isn't ad hoc ever. Same technologies in the room. So we think that we need probably 10 facilities in Mexico alone just to make a material impact on the need within the United States. So again, 273 people. one every 8 minutes. During this podcast, probably, I don't know, 4 people, 5 people will die of an opiate overdose. That's how serious it is. And again, we're not talking about heroin addicts. We're talking about people just like the person in my family who had a prescription, did what they were told, and then ended up addicted and having to find it in an illicit way. Now with the infiltration of fentanyl into street drugs, it's become incredibly dangerous. This is what's making the headlines. The headlines are no longer about, how bad drug addicts are. The headlines are about how dangerous street drugs are. And there was just an article yesterday I saw. It's not just heroin and opiates. It's cocaine. It's Molly, MDMA, et cetera. This substance is finding its way into illicit street drugs, and that makes it incredibly dangerous. So the last point, we believe that this is a global epidemic, first of trauma and addiction. And we see a serious tramadol addiction, even in Gabon, even in West Africa, right? Even where the substance comes from. But it's not used there in the way that we're using it. So we intend to have at least one facility in Mexico, more than we already do, in New Zealand, where it is legal. There's some complications about usage there. But these are legal issues that we believe as a team we can overcome in South Africa, in Brazil, in Portugal, and other parts of Europe.
And what's the pathway to it being for you being able to operate in the U.S., right? I think a lot of people are probably thinking, oh, well, not Portland, Oregon decriminalized all drugs. There are a lot of movements like decriminalize nature to decriminalize a lot of these plant-based psychedelics, which Ibogaine is. How do you see a future in which you're able to operate in the U.S.?
It's a great question. And, look, we think we need to build a network of facilities and capacity outside of the U.S. because people are dying today, right? We can't wait 10 years for it to be legal or longer. The FDA and other organizations have been looking at what would need to be true for Ibogaine to be legal or decriminalized for quite some time. But you're right. In certain environments, certain jurisdictions, plant medicines have been decriminalized. We support that 100%. But if you look at the fine print, it's usually for non-commercial use. So they've decriminalized possession, and they've decriminalized, in some cases, the use by individuals, but the sale of it is not decriminalized. And so there's an inherent conflict in what we're doing. We don't sell Ibogaine. We don't possess. We don't import. We don't manufacture. We don't store Ibogaine in the U.S., and we never will. However, we would love to see addicts who are seeking treatment, people who are suffering from trauma, who are seeking treatment, have access to this plant medicine, whether it's through us or anyone else. And a decrim sort of strategy is likely to increase that possibility.
Yeah. So you would basically the decriminalization won't allow you to operate in the U.S. You would basically need either the FDA to approve Ibogaine as a treatment for something, and then you could offer it, off label, or maybe you would need a jurisdiction to go one step further beyond. You need a jurisdiction to go beyond decriminalization and into, either medical use or full recreational legalization, basically.
Yes.
Those things may happen,
there's
but that
another
will be
scenario.
years away, right? Okay.
There's another scenario, which is, opiate overdose, alcoholism, drug addiction is directly affecting the economics of state and municipal governments, right? It affects law enforcement costs. It affects incarceration. It affects therapies, hopefully. And so there's a huge drain on the economic contribution by these people in many dimensions. And so it's in the interest of cities, states, and we think the federal government to offer treatment that works. So Ibogaine is known to work at a statistical, consistent basis, much, much higher than conventional therapies. High double digit as opposed to low single digits of conventional therapies. So we think that once there is material evidence that shows the success of this treatment in a medically supervised manner with qualified professionals, and we have individuals who can testify to this, not anecdotally, but we can show from observational and clinical research the success of these treatments, which we know we'll get to. Right? This is not an experiment. We know we'll get there. We just need the consistent evidence to show that this stuff works. Then I think we'll have the opportunity to at least ask municipal or state governmental officials, hey, can we help you with this problem? Will you give us the opportunity, like you did with medical marijuana, to help these people who desperately need what is now an alternative treatment to address this extremely expensive problem that's causing chaos, it's causing havoc, and it's causing great suffering for your constituents. So medical marijuana is a similar roadmap, similar playbook. Marijuana, as you know, is still a Schedule I substance federally, but it's oftentimes used legally at the state level. That started in the way that we think this may play out. Nevertheless, we need to do treatments today because people are dying today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Maybe it would be useful to get into some of the, more fine business details of this. I think that when you talk to a lot of the people that are investing actively in the psychedelic space, they sort of have this notion that, well, the clinics, they kind of group everything that's a physical location together into clinics. And they say, well, the clinics are kind of unprofitable, which is largely correct when you're talking about like these ketamine clinics that are popping up all over the US. How should people view what you're doing as different from what these, ketamine clinic operators are doing? And why is there, maybe more of a, economic upside to this business model as opposed to that traditional like ketamine clinic model?
Well, I think we've adequately touched on the addressable market, right? So there's millions of people that have seriously problematic addictive behaviors to substances and other experiences. So eating disorders, gambling, sex, pornography, device addiction, we believe that we will have the opportunity to help treat, right? So the market is much bigger than where we've invoked the conversation, which is where people are dying today. So there's an ocean of need and an ocean of demand. And the reason people don't go to treatment in the United States is three reasons. Number one, it's extremely expensive. So we can provide a better result more quickly with longer positive outcomes at a third of the price, right? Now, let's be clear. This isn't for us. This isn't about trying to keep this as cheap as possible. We are priced at about the same level of other Ibogaine treatment facilities like Clear Sky. But what we've done is added, using telemedicine, we've added a set of services that increase the likelihood of success materially, but don't significantly increase the cost structure. The reason Field Trip and others have such a capital intensive structure is because those doctors are based in an office where you go. So we can offer through telemedicine a much more cost effective service to prepare you for Ibogaine. When you do the procedure, when one does the procedure, they're probably comparing it to what they would pay in a conventional drug and alcohol treatment facility. So we're about a third, significantly less than what they're charging. The reason that we're not building facilities, right? We are finding purpose-designed, purpose-built facilities that will work for what we're doing, a medical procedure. We're negotiating long-term leases, and we're prepared to build a network, sort of a campus, right? So we use certain facilities for detoxification and treatment, other facilities for acute aftercare, and other facilities for longer-term aftercare. They all kind of have a similar brand continuity, care continuity, and an experience from the client's perspective. The reason we're more profitable than other retreats is, one, we can treat more people more quickly, meaning an Ibogaine treatment, the procedure itself is a matter of hours, right? What we're doing before that and after that is ensuring your safety and ensuring increasing the statistical likelihood of success. So for people that don't have detoxification requirements, this can be a fairly quick procedure. For people that do, it can be a longer experience at the facility, but still, the cost structure of that service is lower than conventional therapy, but the price is materially higher than a retreat, right? This is not an ayahuasca adventure. And so people are, to get your life back, to get back to work, to save your life, to help someone who has tried every other option, right? This is worth paying significantly more, $10,000, $12,000 for a week of treatment. This is different than the $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, sometimes $100,000 treatment that price tag for conventional treatment in the U.S.,
which doesn't work most of the time, right?
Right.
Yeah. One thing you said back there is you said for patients without detoxification requirements. I guess you're talking about people that are addicted to things besides opioids. So you sort of touched briefly on like alcohol. I guess alcohol would have detoxification,
well, alcohol
but
is a serious
gambling.
Detox. Yeah, alcohol is a serious detox. So if we take the substance use disorders off the table for a moment and we focus on trauma, PTSD. So now we have people who might drink too much, but they're not drinking so much that they have to detox. People out of 100 at some point in their life, 15 million adults have PTSD in any given year, right? 70% of Americans experience a major traumatic event in their lifetime. So what happens is they have an experience like that. We've read the articles in Time magazine about the heroes who have been deployed overseas and come back. They were trained to be effective soldiers, but they weren't trained to address the trauma and the traumatic brain injury that may occur through their deployment. So we've seen Ibogaine work consistently for this patient population as well. Now, we also are doing research at Beond to open that conversation up so that we can work with our psychologists to better understand if it works for Navy SEALs, does it work for second and third generation Holocaust survivors? Does it work for people who are wrongfully accused, wrongfully incarcerated, wrongfully convicted for a crime, people who are exonerated through programs like the Innocence Project? Does it work for adult eyewitnesses on mass shootings on U.S. campuses, right? There's a giant patient population of trauma. These people don't have to detox. They can likely have the qualification and preparation for an Ibogaine procedure happen more quickly, and the aftercare happen more quickly, which might impact the cost structure and the price point.
That makes sense. Yeah, and on PTSD and trauma, it's easy to think that, oh, that's something that soldiers or people who have been in mass shootings or an earthquake or something suffer from. But I've been reading the book "The Body Keeps the Score," which is sort of like the
Great one. Great
user
book.
manual for PTSD, I guess. And one of the points that is made in that book over and over again is that things that most people would not put into those same categories, like even something as simple, I say simple as if it's not that big of a deal, but something like an emotionally neglectful parent can manifest in your body in the same way that being involved in, an active shooter situation or something can. And so, yeah, like you said, a tremendous number of people in the US have, various symptoms and repercussions from trauma that they've experienced at some point in their life. And I think seeing how things like Ibogaine can be used to treat the underlying physical manifestations of the trauma is a very interesting thing. And that's why I think these observational studies that you guys are going to be running at Beond are so cool.
Yeah. So again, I mean, these studies are run independently. They're run by psychologists who are trained and experienced in doing this. We're providing the facility. We're encouraging that this work be done so that the truth about the efficacy of Ibogaine for these types of diagnoses can be known. We believe that, if 75% of people receiving treatment for substance abuse have histories of trauma, there's a corollary here. Like, we're actually getting to the root of the problem earlier for certain people. And we know, if you read some of the research that MAPS has been publishing, that if you can get to the client sooner and closer to the traumatic event with a therapy that works, you have a much more successful outcome. And so, we think that Ibogaine assisted therapy for trauma should be made available for any adult who qualifies medically and psychologically for that treatment. So those people don't have to detox. They can engage in therapy more quickly.
Right. And what about drugs besides Ibogaine? Right. I know that Beond, you guys use Ibogaine, but you're not an Ibogaine company. You're a healing company, right? So is there a future in which you're using other psychedelic drugs besides just Ibogaine?
Well, yes. Look, as I think I made clear, we're focused where the critical problem is right now: fatal overdoses, veteran suicide, the real catastrophes in people's lives and in communities and families through substance use disorder. But that opens up the conversation to, what about all the other mental health problems? What about anxiety? What about depression, where people are not having these catastrophic outcomes, but need relief? They need medically supervised, successful treatment. And of course, our doctors are both capable and willing to provide those sorts of services with other plant medicines. We really do. I think our ethos is oriented around the substances that are derived directly from nature. No offense, to those substances that result from both intentional and experimental from laboratory environments. However, we think for certain types of intentions, nature got it right. And so until and unless we find through science that these synthetic substances work better, then we're going to use the plant medicines that we think work most effectively. Now, what that causes, though, is a much more robust business strategy around the support of the communities from which these substances are derived. We believe that we can't heal the individual while harming the community from which the substance comes. So we have to significantly support programs in West Africa through Blessings of the Forest and other nonprofit organizations that are indigenous led, community-based agriculture, regenerative agricultural programs where the communities are incentivized for the long-term success of their farming practices, which have always been in their history, right? It's only recently that they've been incentivized to, go for the quick cash through psychedelic treatments, psychedelic companies, et cetera. So we believe that we have to heal the communities in West Africa and other parts or help heal through capital investment, through nonprofit contributions, in order to essentially receive the medicine, the plant medicine, that is going to have the greatest effect on the individual.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important that you're concerned with, the ethical supply chain. Is the iboga, I guess it's a tree, is it endangered? Is it at risk for being endangered? Is that kind of the situation that we're in?
It is at risk for sure. I don't think there's a lot of agreed upon fact about this yet. Certainly, it takes a long time to cultivate, and more of it should be cultivated for the benefit of the world. But certainly. The economic incentives for the support of the long-term agricultural practices and the development of the communities. We're talking about schools. We're talking about healthcare facilities in West Africa and in that region of the world are necessary. So we're really excited about some of the commitments by the Gabonese government to ensure that the substances can be distributed, exported from Gabon, but to do that in a way that has a chain of custody of this substance that shows that this particular portion of this medication actually resulted in a positive impact in the community from which it was derived, rather than just sort of a slightly higher level, acquisition of the substance in the street in Gabon through a highest bidder. We can do better. We can do better as an industry. We can do better. We have an opportunity as entrepreneurs and as leaders to usher business practices into this sector that demonstrate on a higher order level of thinking. If we can do well by doing good across the entire spectrum of care, we should try. We should prove that is possible.
100%, man. Totally on the same page there. I think it's very important that not just you guys, but the entire psychedelic industry holds itself to, a higher standard than, maybe some of these other industries that people in the psychedelics world like to kind of, criticize and point fingers at. So
we're very proud endorsers of the North Star Pledge.
Yes.
We encourage everyone to read that pledge, to sign that pledge. We have a very strong commitment to a patient bill of rights, which has objective third-party, oversight of any claims that might be made by anyone that participates in our care continuum. This is super important that we do everything that the conventional healthcare providers would do, and then much more.
Yeah. Taking it beyond the standard. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we get a nickel every time you say the word beyond.
All right. Every time I say beyond.
But you have to spell it without the Y.
That's right. Yeah. For people listening, it's Beond. There's no Y.
Beond.us, right? Beyond Us is the solution. If you read our manifesto, we, as you pointed out, Brahman, I appreciate that very much. we think the part of the problem of this, medical industrial complex is they're in the treatment business. They're in the treatment, they're in the business of providing repeat treatment, consistent prescriptions. Come back and get your amber bottle filled at CVS and elsewhere. We think we're in the healing business so that people can get on with what they really want to do, is not see themselves as mentally ill or an addict, but someone who has put that behind them and is now living, right? They're beyond their addiction, beyond the narrative, beyond the stories they tell themselves as to why they are that way. And they can now actually become part of a solution for other people, an example for other people. Most importantly, their family and their kids.
Yeah, I love it. So where is Beond at now? I mean, if can people go if they're interested? Can they go to the website? Can they sign up for treatment? What's sort of the status of the company as of now?
That's exactly right. I mean, we have clients, we have medically qualified them, they are getting treatment. We're also we're always refining our protocols and improving our approach to how we are supporting clients in aftercare, right? So again, think about this. Once we help you overcome your substance use disorder, guess what happens? That's when the trauma and the causes of those behaviors are much more apparent. And that's when we believe we have to be prepared to envelop you in the therapy and essentially wrap you up in the types of professional therapeutic procedures that will help escort you to the healing that you're seeking. We're always improving that. So where we are now is really focusing on that aftercare piece and opening our next facilities. So we're targeting the west coast of Mexico now. We need to have geographical accessibility to people west of the Mississippi. We're right now in the Yucatan Peninsula because that's where our medical staff was based originally. However, those people are already engaged in training of others to operate the facilities that we now have so that they can go open the next set of facilities on the west coast of Mexico. So where we are now is you can go to beond.us, beond.us. You can fill out a set of questions, which will cause us to we promise less than 24-hour response and engage you in that qualification process. It works pretty well.
Yeah.
Works pretty well.
Awesome. That's so cool. Well, Tom, we've gone through a lot. Is there anything that you think we missed that you want to kind of get out of the way, or anything else that you want to, any other points that you want to make? I feel like we kind of covered the majority of it.
I think we did a good job. I mean, you ask good questions, Bram.
Thanks, Tom.
You ask good due diligence questions. You ask good podcast questions. I always learn from our conversations. I mean, I think, we've touched on a lot of really interesting topics. One of the ones that I think is most interesting that we haven't is the next generation of healthcare provider, and how did they embrace this, what we consider Ibogaine as technology, right? It's a technology that accelerates the outcomes that people are seeking, that we hope to help them achieve. So helping, if you think laterally or metaphorically, there's a whole bunch of MDs, nurses, psychologists, nurse practitioners that want to understand this technology. And we see Beond as also a teaching facility. We're opening a residency program for new doctors. They have to qualify, just like a teaching hospital. They don't get to do anything except assist the doctors. But we've been really, really pleased at how many people are interested in this. Because they understand that this technology is changing mental health and the spectrum of tools available for them to do what they signed up to do, which is to help people.
Yeah, I think one of the defining themes, I guess, maybe of the next 12 months will be the slow integration of psychedelic medicine into the world of just medicine. And we just saw, I think it was last week, Cerebral, which is a massive telehealth platform for mental health that is not psychedelic focused at all. They offer, SSRIs and Adderall and that sort of thing. And I think they have like 300 billion in funding from SoftBank, or they're a very large company. They just partnered with one of the ketamine clinic providers to start offering, ketamine to their patients. And so I think that, I think that's the kind of thing that we're
hoping to do, Brahm, in all seriousness. It may seem, look, we're doing more treatments with Ibogaine than have ever been done in the history of the Ibogaine underground treatment, community. We also think that partnering with conventional drug and alcohol treatment facilities to develop protocols that will integrate well with their environment. So this month we're starting a series of professional online panels and webinars for professional therapists, where we're helping them understand, one, the technology and how does it work, but two, that we want to work with them so that we can help them prepare their clients, that we can help them usher their clients into an environment where they'll be medically safe and medically qualified and taken good care of. And then we'll usher them back to those therapists, to those environments where they can actually do additional work, right? This is really exciting to us. We're starting, our first one, I think, is on the 16th. We have one with Gabor Mate on the 24th of March. Looking at trauma, addiction, and psychedelic assisted therapies. And then we have every 2 weeks, I think in August, different professionals. If you go to Beond.us/Ibogaine Insights, you can learn of all the different people. So, psychologists, academics, doctors, nurses, researchers, pharmacists that are all sort of helping to educate that professional audience so they better understand how we can work together to help them help their clients. And I think we could do that at a very high level with the large scale drug and alcohol treatment facilities. Then we can really make a difference.
Yeah, I love that, because you guys are becoming not just the leader in the treatment itself, but sort of the thought leader in the industry, which is very cool. It's amazing stuff that you guys are doing there, Tom. Yeah,
it's what's needed. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Tom, man, thank you so much for taking the time to talk. I'm sure people are going to learn a lot from this episode. And I think, 12 months from now, we'll have to do this again and catch up and, see where everything's at. Because I think the next 12 months are going to be, pretty serious. I think you guys are going to accomplish a lot. And I'm just really looking forward to seeing how things, continue to go beyond.
Thank you, Brahm. We're really excited to partner with you, to be part of this podcast. And I would say if we're going to do it in a year, we'd like to do the podcast from one of our facilities in Mexico. I hope you're not opposed
to coming down. I'll fly down
and setting up your equipment in a facility and see what it really feels like.
I'm not going to turn down. I'm not going to turn down a trip to Mexico to podcast. So yeah, let's do it. All right, man. Well, I'll see you in Mexico then. All right.
All right, Brahm. Thank you very much. It's great to see you. It's great to be here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom. Talk soon.